Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I will be talking about A Hat in Time. This game is reminiscent of the golden age of 3D platformers around the Nintendo 64, GameCube, PlayStation 2 era. I feel like these games came in abundance. You would get a ton of games such as, Gex was like this. You had Banjo and Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64. A lot of licensed games were this type of genre as well, though the one that comes to mind is Toy Story, where you have a mascot and you are set in this 3D platforming world full of things to collect, little objects. A lot of games took inspiration from Mario 64. So when you think of Mario 64, where you go into a world and you are out to get your power star, a lot of games were like that back in the day, but I feel like the game industry got pretty sick of this type of genre, so you don't see a whole lot of games like this nowadays. And I think that was the big selling point for this game when it was on Kickstarter. It was to bring back the days of old of 3D platforming. I know Yooka-Laylee also came out around this time, trying to scratch that nostalgic 3D platformer itch. The plot is pretty simple, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You are playing as an alien who is basically a little human girl, and you are flying your spaceship trying to get home, and your spaceship is powered by these hourglasses called timepieces. Your plans are suddenly halted when the mafia comes and tries to make you pay a toll in order to pass by their world. Events unfold from there, but you basically lose all of your timepieces and they are scattered across all the worlds around your spaceship. So Hat Girl, that's her name, she is tasked with collecting all of the timepieces in order to get her spaceship powering up and raring to go back home. During the beginning of your travels, you encounter another girl who has a mustache. I believe her name is just Mustache Girl, very on the nose. She does not like bad guys, but in her hatred of stopping the bad guys, she becomes one herself. So she is out to collect your timepieces as well, because these timepieces have the ability to travel back in time, and this gives her plenty of power to stop the bad guys, but it also makes her become pretty malicious in the process. So when you think of the gameplay, think of something similar to Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Sunshine. As you explore Hat Girl's spaceship, you uncover these telescopes, and by looking through the telescopes, you are taken to the world that the telescope is looking at. And there are different acts that you can choose in these worlds, and each act has its own timepiece that you have to get. And you get these through various objectives. Think like a Super Mario 64. You go to the first world, and depending on what chapter you pick, the world changes and alters slightly. It even as you go into the world, it'll show you go here to start your process in order to get this timepiece. There's even a whole section of this game where you go into this giant windmill, lots of gears, lots of turning, moving parts that you have to platform on. I really felt like this was inspired by the clock world in Super Mario 64, where you're jumping on all the moving parts of the clock. It was just like that in this windmill levels. I felt like they were directly inspired by these games of old. Now, how does Hat Girl control? Because how your main character controls is a big part on how enjoyable the 3D platformer is, and I'm happy to say that Hat Girl controls like a dream. She has a jump, a double jump, she has a dive, and the big selling point to this game, she has use of various hat abilities that you unlock throughout playing the game, and these hat abilities all have their own fun mechanics as well. She has an umbrella that she uses as a melee attack, and then in terms of attack, she also has this homing dive. When you jump in the air and you pinpoint exactly in front of an enemy, you can do this little homing dive at them. I felt like the homing dive was a little bit harder to pull off. I felt like you had to be just in the right position in order to do it, so I typically did not use that if I didn't have to. Otherwise, Hat Girl just controls awesome. I never had any problems. Super fluid. I like the gravity on her a lot better than something like Mario 64 or Super Mario Sunshine. I just feel like you really have to get that control right in order to have an enjoyable 3D platformer. I do want to talk a little bit more about her dive, however. She has this little dive similar to something like Super Mario Sunshine, but it works so much better. And you also have the ability to cancel out of your dive mid-air. So, you know, in Super Mario Sunshine, you are pretty committed if you do a dive, and it is very possible that you dive onto the ground that you're trying to get to and you slide right off. In this one, you can just cancel right out of that dive whenever you want. And if you hit the dive button right when you hit the ground, you do another additional little hop, and it's really fluid and it's really easy to going fast with this dive hopping mechanic if you get your timing right. And I feel like fluidity in a platformer is also really important. I mentioned acquiring different hats as you play through. You get these by collecting the resource yarn. And if at least one of those yarns is a yarn for a new hat, you can craft one of the new hats. I never really got the whole different type of yarn mechanic, like, oh, you got an ice yarn, you got a time warp yarn. You only need one of those types of yarns, and if you collect different types of yarn, if you already crafted the hat that yarn corresponds to, then it just acts as a generic yarn. So say if I already have the ice ground pound ability hat and I get another ice yarn, it just turns into a regular yarn that I can use to craft the time warp hat. I just think that they should have just had normal yarn, like you just got a yarn, good job. It just kind of works as a stopgate in order for you to not be able to get certain yarn until you access certain chapters, certain acts, I suppose. But they should just let you be able to craft any of the hats right off the bat, because it's not like it would break the game if I crafted the time warp hat early in the game. If I just saved up all my yarn to craft that one, I don't really see that breaking the game that much. I don't think that they needed these little time stoppers until you reach certain parts in the game. They should just let you craft any hat right off the bat, in my opinion. There's a ton of customizing in this game, which I always enjoy. It really gives you incentive to collect all the resources, all the coins. You can change the appearance of all your different hats. You can change your colors for Hat Girl. There's some customization in your actual hub world, Hat Girl's spaceship. You can craft these little models. You can assemble them the right way if you collect all of the parts. And there are also badges that you can equip to Hat Girl that have various effects. I feel like there weren't too many badges in this game, however. There was only about 10, and you can buy them from this weird glitchy vendor. He's peppered throughout the world, and if you collect enough of these orbs that kind of act like coins in a regular game, just kind of tell you where to go, what platforms you can interact with. If you collect enough of these orbs, you can purchase these badges, and these badges have some varying cool effects. There's a sprint hat that you use. There's a badge that you can equip that make it so you just ride around this scooter instead. Normally, when you dive into walls as Hat Girl, you will just kind of fall to the ground, kind of like similar to Mario Odyssey. If you dive into a wall, you'll just fall right down. But Hat Girl has the ability to vault up walls of just a certain amount of distance to climb up to the ledge, and there's a badge that you equip where if you dive into a wall, you'll just start vaulting up into it instead of just falling to the ground. There's the typical magnet badge that lets collectible resources hover to you if you get near enough to them instead of actually having to touch them, which is nice. I just feel like I wish there was more badges in this game, because there are even a couple of dud badges, just silly gimmicky ones that like make voices mumbled instead of being able to hear them clearly. And you can only equip 3 badges at once. And you do acquire a badge about the middle of the game called the grappling hook that lets you swing from little hooks above the ground, you know, typical Spider-Man style. And this does take up a badge slot. I really wish that the grappling hook itself was just a piece of equipment that you didn't have to use, so you could use all 3 slots for badges themselves. Really, you are required to have that grappling hook most of the time, so you really only have 2 badge slots available. One of the really big selling points of this game is its humor. I felt like it genuinely made me laugh out loud quite a lot of the times. It just has that kind of quirky tone, that silly, funny humor to it. One of the most memorable moments for me, at least, is there's this whole Halloween type of world. It's like a haunted woods, and you are doing these contracts for a spirit who basically took your soul. And in order to get your soul back, you have to fulfill these contracts. He's the final boss of this world. He is forcing you to sign this contract. Just go away. Just leave me alone. I'm sick of you, Hat Girl. And so you are presented to this contract in normal hostile as all the other contracts. And Hat Girl just scribbles it out, and all the conditions to leave, she scribbles it out and writes to have fun, and to leave me alone, she scribbles it out and says to be my BFF, and she writes hearts all over the place and have fun. And the spirit just is silent for a second, and he's just like, you know, that's not how contracts work, right? Just lots of funny moments like that, funny beats. I think the worlds themselves have a funny, quirky tone to it. I mentioned there's a whole mafia town where all the characters talk in these heavy Russian mafia accents. There's that whole haunted woods world where you have to fight this haunted outhouse, basically, that is inhabited by your soul. There's this really unique idea where you are in Hollywood, and there are two bird directors. There's like this Scottish owl bird versus this DJ penguin, and depending on how well you play through the acts depends on which bird wins the Oscar equivalent, and then depending on which bird wins, that's like the boss that you have to fight at the end. I don't know, I just really like the timing and the humor in this game, and humor is very difficult to pull off in video games because humor depends a lot on timing. I like Hat Girl as a character. I think she's just a fun, cute little girl. She has this little girl voice. She just wants to be everyone's friend. She even has these little emotes that you can pull off, like you can blow a kiss, or you can like stick out your tongue and blow out a raspberry. They absolutely nailed the tone and the feeling of the 3D platformer games of old. As far as challenge goes, I feel like it really nailed that challenge level. Like the bosses themselves actually got pretty hard, and it would take multiple attempts. They have these choreographed attacks that you have to memorize how to dodge. And the platforming itself is very satisfying to pull off. Like I said, Hat Girl controls like a dream. Each of these worlds can trigger these rifts that you can find throughout the world. It's just like this little screenshot of this is where the time rift is. And if you can find that time rift in the world, then it takes you to this straight up platforming challenge, very reminiscent of the secrets in Super Mario Sunshine. You know, those secret shines where they take away your water jetpack, and it's just straight up platforming on these moving platforms. They even have that elongated rectangular box that rotates, and it has these little bumps on it, straight out of Super Mario Sunshine into this game. But I feel like I really enjoyed these time rifts in A Hat in Time better than those levels in Super Mario Sunshine. Probably because Hat Girl controls a lot better than Mario does in those games. They also have these additional time rifts where you have to collect a certain amount of these orbs in order to progress through the chapters. And hidden throughout each of these sections of this time rift, you can collect these hidden pictures. And if you collect them all, it's a backstory to the characters in the world. So I'll talk about that Hollywood bird world that you go to. If you go to the time rift and you collect all the pictures, you can see how that Scottish owl and the DJ penguin started out as little kids. You can get the little backstory to them. Oh, I just thought of another pretty funny act that really tickled my funny bone in that bird world where they're competing. You are making like this train heist type of movie with the Scottish owl, and there are some sketchy birds hidden throughout the level, and as you progress, they will track you down and have you answer these questions, and it kind of ends up like an ad lib kind of book where they'll ask you like, what is your pet's name? And then as you answer, he'll be like, oh, I see. So your pet's pet name is because that's just the noise he uses for any word that you answer. So you are answering all these questions, and then the actual gameplay starts playing out, and the crows will respond depending on what answer you put in. So you'll say, what is an embarrassing part about you that you are ashamed about? And I just put something like eyebrows. And as you are playing through, you'll come across this group of these sketchy birds huddled up. And then he had the most ridiculous eyebrows, and then all the crows like laugh out loud because you're just eavesdropping on the talking about you. Or you have to rescue like this cardboard cutout of this dog that had your pet's name. These things are never very funny as I try to repeat them. This happens to me all the time where I'll try to recreate a joke that I heard from a comedian or something like that, and it doesn't sound very funny as I'm trying to repeat it, but trust me, as you're playing through, it plays out very well. Now, I'm not sure if this was an artistic choice or not, but aesthetically, it does seem like it was plucked straight out of the early 2000s. It just seems to be a little bit rough around the edges. Certain characters might animate a little bit janky or stuttery. It's not unusual for objects to clip into each other, and that can be a real plus or minus if you are feeling nostalgic for this era or not. If you told me this game originally came out for the GameCube, I wouldn't question you. I certainly would have liked a map when I go to each of these worlds. They aren't too big of a world, so I guess you don't really need a map, but I would definitely like one, especially to show me where the objectives are. The hat that Hat Girl starts out with will have this little waypoint showing you where to go, but I just would have liked a map in order for me to help get my bearings. There's a couple of hallway acts that you don't really have to worry about navigating through, but even that like train level with the ad-lib birds, you do have to backtrack back and forth in order to progress. So I got lost a couple of times. A map would have just been nifty, and I felt like it wouldn't have been too hard to include. I want to believe most of my complaints about this game have to do with the Switch port itself. I have read, I was warned before I even bought this game, that this port for this game does not run well on the Switch. It is made to be played on a PC or something like that, because they had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to get this game to run. I don't really get that because it's not visually that impressive of a game. They definitely nailed visually that N64, GameCube, PlayStation 2 era. But just objects that move even slightly in the distance are really pixelated and move at a really low FPS until you get near them, and then they start looking a little smoother and animating a little smoother, looking a little bit better as you get closer to them. But you don't even have to be that far away in order for things to look pretty bad. It's almost like they had to make that sacrifice in order to get Hat Girl to control and move smoothly. I never had any problem moving Hat Girl. She never dropped in FPS, buttery smooth, and I guess if they had to make these visual sacrifices in order to get her to move like that, I'm okay with that. There's a very long loading screen anytime you enter a world. I want to say you're going to be waiting for at least a minute, which isn't that bad because each of the acts has its own unique loading screen art, which I really enjoyed. I almost wish that I could just look through all this loading screen art because it is just so charming seeing Hat Girl interact. It's kind of like a little preview of what you're going to be doing during that act. There's a whole level where you are leading like this parade, so the loading screen art is her balancing on this little wire with a parade following behind her as she has this little flag. Very charming, makes you like Hat Girl a whole lot more when you look at this loading screen art. I do felt like I fought the camera the whole time. The default is the camera just has a mind of its own. It just tries to make it so you don't have to worry about the camera at all. But I felt like this just made the platforming really clunky and hard to control. So I turned off the automatic camera to manual. So I was just controlling it with the right stick the whole time. And playing handheld with this game on the Nintendo Switch, the camera is very, very far away. So I set the settings of the camera to very close. And even then, I felt like the camera was backed up way too much. I wish I could scroll in even farther. This might not be a problem on the TV though. Even then, I felt like the camera just would clip into the walls all the time. This was especially prevalent when I was in an enclosed area. It was just difficult to see. Changing those camera settings definitely helped, but I just felt like it was an issue the whole time. It's a shorter game. There's not a whole lot of content here, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I want to say the base game took me maybe 6 hours, which isn't that long compared to most games. I just wish there was a couple of worlds or even acts peppered in throughout this game. The final world was just one level, and it's basically the final boss fight. Now, you can extend your game a little bit in the form of DLC. I did get the physical version of this game, and it came bundled in with the Seal the Deal DLC. This has an additional world, and it's like this Arctic cruise ship piloted by this walrus, and that was fun, but this only had 3 acts and 2 time rifts, so playing through that world was very, very quick. I could play through it in about an hour. The deal part of this DLC for the Seal the Deal is the ghost that I talked about in the Haunted Forest. He basically has these additional challenges for you to play through, and it's basically like a remix version of a chapter of an act that I already played through, just with a bit ramped up difficulty. And the reward for this is additional costumes and customization for Hat Girl. I played through a couple of these, and I just thought, you know, I'm good, because I had just recently played through these chapters, these objectives already. It's just a remix version of those. But I guess the seal world was pretty fun. It's peppered out with these seals, and they talk kind of like babies. They like, their R's are W's, so I'm not even going to attempt to try and recreate what the seals talk like, but they just talk like little babies. They're cute little seals, I guess. It's just not that long of a DLC, and I'm not sure if I can recommend buying this DLC if you bought this game digitally and it didn't come bundled with this. Now, if you just can't get enough of Hat in Time, there's also an additional DLC, and it looks like it takes place in this neon lit city at night. It looks like there's some sort of cat theming to go along with it. This did not come bundled in with the physical version of the game, however, and I did not buy it and play it because I was not too impressed with the Seal the Deal DLC. But give it a shot if you just can't get enough of A Hat in Time. With the base game, there are only 40 timepieces that you uncover, so it shouldn't take that long to play through. The DLC just adds an additional 5 timepieces. And then the second DLC, I believe, I didn't play through this one, but it is 10 more timepieces. So if you get all the DLC, I want to say it's about 55 timepieces, which isn't that much. Even Super Mario 64 had, I think it was 120 stars if I'm not mistaken. So that can kind of be some measure on how long you will be playing this game. I did manage to get all of the timepieces that I could. I didn't, like I said, I didn't play through the second DLC, so I got 45 timepieces. Overall, you know, it's a short experience, but if you're just itching to get that 3D platformer feel, if Yooka-Laylee didn't quite do it for you, you might want to look into this game. I know a lot of people really like it. I would say that I really like it, but nothing really amazed me with it. It just did everything right. It did everything good, but it didn't do anything great. That's why I think I will give this game a 3 out of 5. If you're looking to play that type of genre, I recommend it. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about A Hat in Time. Let me know some of your favorite mascot 3D platformers from back in the day. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is another one that recently got remastered. That's it for me, though. I'll talk to you later. Bye!